In the past, we've reviewed quite a few different budget AV receivers from Costco, all around the $400 price range. Well, since making those reviews, Costco's quietly released another budget receiver, the Denon AVR-S760H. So that's why today we're going to be checking it out and talking about why it might be the best entry-level receiver that Costco's ever sold. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, then stick around and we'll get into it right after the intro. Alright, so as I mentioned, this is the Denon AVR-S760H, which is actually an upgraded version of the S750H that we reviewed back in April. This receiver is actually pretty surprising because Costco decided to release it without warning, and at the time of writing this video, it's hard to even get much information about it. Either way, let's get right into it. This is a 7.2 channel Dolby Atmos AV receiver that's rated to push out 75 watts per channel into 8 ohms, just like the 750H. Of course, in the box, you'll get a few accessories like the remote, radio antennas, and one of these little cardboard tripods that's included for the Odyssey calibration microphone. Taking a quick look at the back of the receiver, we have 7 pairs of binding posts for connecting speakers, a phono preamp for hooking up a turntable, and a couple of analog stereo inputs, AM/FM antenna connectors, a pair of subwoofer outputs, 2 composite video connectors for older devices like Laserdisc or DVD players, as well as digital coaxial and Toslink connectors for digital audio. We also get an Ethernet network port, and finally some HDMI ports, 6 inputs and 1 output. Again, pretty much just like the 750H from 2019, except we actually get 1 extra port on the 760. The S760H is also 17.1 inches wide by 13.3 inches deep by 6 inches tall, and it weighs in at about 19 pounds or around 8.5 kilograms. Again, just like the 750H. So what exactly is the difference here? Well, that's where things start to get interesting, because the AVR-S760H is, as far as we can tell, the first AV receiver to come in at this price point with working HDMI 2.1 support. In our previous reviews of the 750H, one of the things that we wish Denon did with their AVR was to add HDMI 2.1 support for 4K 120 and 8K 60. Because it was an older 2019 model, it only supported HDMI 2.0B, which left it behind the Yamaha TSR-700, at least in theory. With that said, since our review came out, it sounds like some people have reported problems with the Yamaha's HDMI 2.1 support, and Yamaha has even started an HDMI board replacement program for the RX V6A and the TSR-700 to try to fix these issues. So that's why we were really excited when we heard about this new Denon AVR that supports HDMI 2.1. You can see on the back of the Denon here that 3 of the 6 HDMI inputs are marked as being 8K compatible, and these are actual HDMI 2.1 ports. We'll be testing these ports with our PS5 later in this video, but before we do, I just wanted to mention a few other things about this receiver that I feel are pretty important. Aesthetically, I really like the way it looks, just like I thought the old 750H looked pretty good, especially for being mostly plastic. It's designed to look like an aluminum faceplate, and along with the big display on the front, it really does a good job of looking like a higher end piece of gear than it actually is. Of course, this actually has all the online features you'd expect from a new receiver, like integration with Amazon Echo, Google Home, and Apple HomePod. It's also compatible with the HEOS app and everything else you'd expect from an HDMI 2.1 receiver, like HDR10, HLG, Dolby Vision VRR, ALLM, and more, which I'll discuss further in a bit. As with most receivers around this price point, you also get built-in room correction. And we've heard good things about the Odyssey room correction built into these Denon AVRs. But for reviews, we usually don't run automatic room correction, just to make sure we can hear what the receiver is capable of in a less ideal situation. This lets us figure out how the receiver itself sounds without any room correction getting in the way. We always recommend trying to listen to the receiver with room correction both enabled and disabled to see which sounds better in your setup. Anyway, once we had everything hooked up, like our Aperion Audio Novus towers and center channel, we could get this 760 set up and get started with the listening tests. The interface built into this receiver is pretty much the same as the 750H, and the initial configuration is pretty straightforward. As far as sound quality goes, it was very similar to the previous 750H, which we already were very happy with, and quite honestly, we were very impressed at how well a receiver at this price point was able to drive our speakers with no problem. If you want to hear how we felt about the sound of this receiver, we definitely recommend checking out our previous review on the 750H, because we feel pretty much all the same conclusions apply here. But again, while the audio of this receiver is pretty good, the thing that we're most excited about is its ability to pass through 4K 120Hz over HDMI 2.1. Of course, to make sure we get a good connection between the PS5, the AVR, and the TV, we're going to need to use good HDMI cables that are rated to deliver a full bandwidth HDMI 2.1 connection. That's why we got a couple of RuPro 8K fiber optic HDMI cables, which are actually HDMI 2.1 certified. Some devices can be pretty picky with the cables you use when trying to run high-speed signals like 4K 120 or 8K 60, so you want to make sure you have high-quality cables to run your console with. We'll leave a link to the RuPro 8K cables we're showing here. We've been using these cables for close to a year without any issues, so we're pretty confident in recommending them. Anyway, we connected our PS5 to the AVR and the AVR to the TV to get started. When we did, we went over the PS5 video settings to see what resolution and refresh rates were available to output to our receiver. And the most we could get was 60 Hz. So we checked the receiver settings and we discovered that we needed to enable 8K enhanced mode on the HDMI port that the PS5 was connected to in order for it to pass through 4K 120. Once we did that and reconfigured HDR on the PS5, we checked again, and lo and behold, we could output full 4K at 120 Hz with HDR10 enabled. The 760H has a pretty handy info menu that you can open to see more information about the video signal, and as you can see here, the AVR is passing through a proper 4K 120 signal. We went ahead and verified this on the TV by going into its settings, and as you can see here, it's also detecting that the receiver's passing through 4K at 120 Hz. Now, because we have a Sony X900H, we can't actually test things like VRR on this receiver because our TV doesn't support those features yet. It sounds like a firmware update is on its way, but at this time of recording this video, we can't test everything right now. With that said, it sounds like a lot of people have had good luck with all the HDMI 2.1 features you'd expect, which again is pretty amazing when you consider the low price point of this AVR. So basically, to wrap this up, the Denon AVR-S760H is a new S750H with support for HDMI 2.1 connectivity. We thought that the 750H was a great receiver in our original review, but with the addition of the 4K 120 and 8K 60 support that the 760H brings, we feel this is the best choice out there right now for an entry-level receiver. In fact, we'd say that this is the best receiver that Costco sells right now for price, sound quality, and features that just work out of the box without needing a firmware update. Especially if you're in the market for a good AVR that will let you run your next-gen game console without any hassles. It also gives you enough power to run a wide range of speakers, and we think this receiver would be a great match for something like the Klipsch 5.0.2 Dolby Atmos system, which we also reviewed and thought was another great deal from Costco. If you want to check that video out, we'll leave a link down in the description. If you're thinking about buying one of these receivers for your theater, keep in mind that the S760H is still coming in stock for the first time at some Costco locations, and it's not even on Costco's website yet, so you might have to search around for a while in order to find one. But if you're willing to wait a while, we think this is one of the best value budget receivers you can buy right now, and with Costco's great return policy, we can highly recommend it. So with all that said, I think it's time to wrap up this video. Thank you guys for watching, and we hope you enjoyed it. Please let us know if you have any questions or comments on the Denon receiver, and we'll do our best to answer them. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss any of our future videos, and as always, have an awesome day.